Week 10 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I look to buy and trade for this week. The first guy, Julio Rodriguez of the Seattle Mariners. So what a rookie he's been so far this season. Here's Julio Rodriguez, and he's an electric player, one of the better fielders already in the league. And this guy brings a lot of energy, and his sweet swing is already one of the sweetest as well, I believe, in the majors. On the season, 8 home runs, 28 RBIs, already 17 stolen bases, 29 runs scored, a 263 average, and a 329 on base. So right there, the numbers look great on the surface. But over the last couple weeks, only 2 homers, 4 RBIs, 8 runs scored, 240 average, and a 364 on base. So right here, Rodriguez, he does strike out a lot, 78 in 232 at-bats. But this guy's very electric, and he's got great swing and a line drive hitter that can hit it to all fields. But the last couple weeks, he's struggling. I think this is an opening for fantasy owners to go out there and get him on their roster, because this guy's a 5-tool player. He does everything that you would want out of him, and I would go get him right now. Well, he's struggling the last few weeks. So the last few games, June 8th at Houston, 0-2. June 10th versus Boston, 0-5. June 11th versus Boston, 2-5, a homer, 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored. June 12th versus Boston, 0-4. June 13th versus Minnesota, 0-1. June 14th versus Minnesota, 1-2 with a run. And June 15th versus Minnesota, 1-4. So right here, he's going to get an everyday opportunity. He's helping this Mariner team. It's not like a Jared Kelenic situation where this guy couldn't hit anything and they had to send him back to the minors a couple times in his early career. But right now he's in a little bit of a slump. And while he's in that slump, I would offer the Rodriguez owner maybe a decent starting pitcher or a 2-for-2 package, a hitter and a pitcher for Rodriguez and a pitcher, and see what you could do. Because once this guy hits a hot streak, I think we're going to see a lot of home runs out of him, and he definitely could finish the season here as a 30-30 guy if he really gets hot, or even a 20-35 guy with the stolen bases, because 17 bags on the year, that's very good, especially it's a lost start in the game. So even with those stolen bases, his value will stay good, and that's why I would get him now. Well, he's been struggling over the last 2 weeks. The next guy's Nick Castellanos of the Philadelphia Phillies. So the Phillies this month here in June, they've been playing great baseball, only losing 2 ball games, I believe, in June, or 3 this month here. So Castellanos, he really hasn't been part of that for this Philly team. 7 home runs, 31 RBIs only, 27 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 253 average, and a 309 on base. And the last couple weeks here, no homers, 3 RBIs, a 238 average, and digging even deeper into the stats, only hitting 222 in the last month with 2 homers and 10 RBIs. So it's very surprising to me that Castellanos, he hasn't done anything offensively with this team, because everyone else is starting to hit home runs for Philly. We've seen Hoskins red hot. Obviously, Bryce Harper and Schwarber amongst the league leaders in the National League in home runs. But Castellanos just can't get anything going and hasn't been part of the tear the Phillies have been on in the month of June here. So the last few games for Castellanos, June 8th at Milwaukee, 1-5. June 9th at the Brewers, 1-2 with a run. June 10th versus the Diamondbacks, 1-4. June 11th versus the D-backs, 2-4 with 2 ribs. June 12th versus Arizona, 0-3. June 13th, he pinched hit versus the Marlins, 1-1. June 14th versus the Marlins, 2-5. And June 15th versus the Marlins, 0-4. So right here, the Phillies, they are a 5-game set at the Washington Nationals. Yeah, which that's a big series. If they could win 4 or even all 5 of those games, this team could definitely get back in the hunt here in the National League East. And I think they need Castellanos to get going. Last season, what a year it was for Castellanos. And I know it was a contract year with 34 and 100, but this guy has legit power. He plays in a bandbox in Citizen Bank Ballpark over there in Philly, and he's going to get hot. So this would be the perfect time to go get him, especially where the last month of the season, he really hasn't done anything for the Phillies or fantasy owners. The next guy is Nolan Gorman of the St. Louis Cardinals. So Gorman, a lot of hype coming up from the minor leagues right here over the last few weeks. And he was tearing it up with already 15 home runs in AAA. So there's nothing left for him to do in the minors. But so far, in the first 80 at-bats in the majors, it's been a mixed bag of results. 3 home runs, 12 RBIs, 13 runs scored, a 266 average, and a 341 on base. But the last 2 weeks here, he's done nothing. 1 homer, 5 RBIs, and a 188 average with 4 runs scored. But the good thing here with Gorman, the versatility, second and third base, he qualifies here. And the only thing with him, which is annoying, owning him, which I have him in a league, is he don't play versus lefties as the youngster Gorman, but he's in there every day besides that. So the last few games here for him, June 9th at Tampa, he pinched hit 0 for 1. June 10th versus Cincinnati, 0 for 4. June 11th versus the Reds, 0 for 2 with a run. June 12th versus the Reds, 2 for 5. June 13th versus Pittsburgh, 1 for 3. Doubleheader June 14th versus the Bucks, 2 for 9. And June 15th versus the Pirates, 1 for 4. So we haven't seen him hit a home run in Gorman since the beginning of the month here, which is definitely troubling a little bit. Now they get a day off as the Cardinals, and they start at the Boston Red Sox a 3-game set where you could get your back going quickly over there in Fenway Park, especially with the short right field pesky porch, which is only like 300 feet. So Gorman, he's definitely got legit power. This guy's got a very powerful swing and a good line drive hitter. And once he gets going and gets more comfortable in the major leagues, I think watch out. This guy could have 30, 35 home run potential as his career goes on. But right now, while he's struggling and not doing much, and he's even been dropped in 5% of fantasy leagues this week, this is a perfect time to go out there and get him. And there's no way I think you got to break the bank for him. The next guy, JT Realmuto of the Philadelphia Phillies. So the Phillies here, they've been on this hot streak winning, like I mentioned, all their games in June besides 2, with just pretty much Harper, Schwarber, and Hoskins, and Bryson Stott's been coming alive. But JT Realmuto, what a bust he's been so far in his Philly seasons the first 2 years. 3 home runs only, 21 RBIs, 29 runs scored, 7 stolen bases, a 243 average, and a 317 on base. But over the last 2 weeks here, he's been non-existent as well. No home runs, 5 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 6 runs scored, a 225 average, and a 289 on base. So imagine if all these guys on Philly were clicking on all cylinders. This team would be unbeatable almost, the way that offense could hit the baseball. But Realmuto the whole season hasn't done anything. And right now, I don't think you got to give up anything of importance at all to get him on your team. Right now, at this point of the year, he's only a name. But he's another guy in that small ballpark that quickly could change things up and get things going and go on a tear as well. June 8th at the Brewers, 1 for 5. June 9th at the Brewers, 0 for 3 with a run. June 11th versus the Diamondbacks, 0 for 3 with a stolen base. June 12th versus Arizona, 3 for 4 with a run. June 13th versus Miami, 0 for 4. June 14th versus Miami, 1 for 5 with an RBI, a stolen base, and a run. And June 15th, he sat out versus Miami with a run, so a 5-game set coming up in Washington, and maybe he could get things going there. But right now, he's definitely been a fantasy disappointment, is Realmuto. And like I mentioned, this is a perfect time to buy him low, and you have to give up pretty much nothing that's going to be costly for your fantasy team. And the 5th and final hitter I look to buy low and trade for this week, Giancarlo Stanton of the New York Yankees. So Stanton, it's a pretty good year overall for him. 13 home runs, 40 RBIs, 21 runs scored, a 268 average, and a 346 on base. And he already served one of his injured list appearances where he usually has 2 or 3 throughout the season. But the last couple weeks here, he's done nothing as Stanton. 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 6 runs scored, 179 average, but still a great on-base percentage, 378. But if you want some power on your team, I think you got to give up a decent starter for Stanton. But obviously, you don't got to break the bank while he's on a hot streak or something where he's hitting 5 home runs a week. So right now, while he's doing nothing, this is a perfect time to get him, because in the hot summer months is where this guy really gets a lot of his numbers in July and August. June 7th in Minnesota, 1 for 5 with a homer and RBI. June 8th in Minnesota, 0 for 3. June 10th versus the Cubs, 0 for 2. June 11th versus the Cubs, 1 for 4, a homer and RBI. June 12th versus the Cubs, 2 for 4, 3 runs, 3 RBIs. June 14th versus the Rays, 0 for 2 with a run. June 15th versus the Rays, 0 for 3. So imagine him and Judge on the same page, just keeping home runs. Forget about it. Judge already 25 homers, Stanton with 13. And this guy's going to get hot again, because once he gets going, he could carry a fantasy team for a month plus here when he gets in that power stroke is Stanton. So right now, while he's had a bad month, hitting only 216 in the time, and over the last 2 weeks hitting under 200, this is a perfect time to go get him, because once he gets on a hot streak, he's going to be a monster once again in fantasy. So that's a few hitters I look to buy and trade for Week 10 of the fantasy baseball season.